For this video, we will be talking about variables. Now, what is a variable? Well, a variable is a name associated with a memory location. You can store a value, and that value can change and vary. The variable types in Java include an int, a double, a boolean, and a string. Now, why do you want to use variables? Well, the reason why is because you want to be able to store values that you can then use later on to refer to in subsequent functions. And to do this, you need to create a memory location that you can store values into. And in order to access that memory location, you'll be using the name associated with it, which is why variables are used so frequently, because you want to be able to transfer information between each line of code, and variables help accomplish this. Now, the reason why there's variable types in Java is because the console likes being organized, and in order to be organized, it has to store these memory locations in specific parts. And in order to distinguish parts from other parts, it's going to use variable types in order to distinguish them. Now, the int stores integers like -1, 1, 3, and 5. This includes negative and positive numbers. The double stores floating point numbers / decimal numbers like 6.3, 1.0, -0.9, just anything that includes decimals. And this can extend outwards, so this can be 6.33333 and 1.00000, and so on and so forth. The reason why you want to be able to distinguish this from this, despite the fact that it is the same number, say 1.000 and 1, is because you want to be specific. And if you say have the say you're doing 1 minus 0.5. Now, if you do just 1 minus 0.5, it will actually print out 0. The reason why is because it's still considered an integer, and 0.5 is not considered an integer. But if you use 1.00 minus 0.5, this will then print out 0.5 rather than 0, because it is considered a double, because it is using decimals. That's the reason why you want to use int, and the reason why you want to use double. The boolean stores true and false statements. This is useful in order to, say, use this for conditional statements that say, if this is true, then do this, or if this is false, then don't do this. And booleans help accomplish this. Now, the string is simply just a sequence of characters enclosed in a pair of double quotes, and this means that, say, any text that you've seen thus far, like this whole thing right here, is called a string. And this is useful in order to make sentences that you want to print in the console, because the int, the double, and the boolean can't use A, B, C, D, E, and all that stuff. It's simply restricted to numbers, numbers with decimals, and true and false. Now, before we start, we'll be using a command called system.out.println, and then variable name, expression / string, and then semicolon. You've encountered this command before, except I haven't explained it as in depth as now. Now, the reason why you want to use this is in order to derive output from the console, so that way you can see what you're actually doing. This is useful in order to check whether something works, whether or not something doesn't work, and to see whether or not you properly created a variable, and see whether or not that data has changed. Now, to break this down, system is a class that's innately created in Java. It's already defined, and it's a parent class to the classes you make. This means that you can refer to it in order to use the methods that it has already defined. And this is a method of the class called println or println. Now, referring back to this, system must always be capitalized in order to be used. System.out means that you're outputting this, and the parentheses right here and right here mean that the data should be put right here. This can range from anything with a variable which has data set equal to it. An expression, this means like, say, 5 minus 3, 4 minus 6, any of that, or true and false. And the string, which can be double quotations and, say, hello world. and as always, end the entire line with a semicolon in order to tell the system that this line is ending. Now, naming variables is very important. Though it's not always going to lead to errors, it does lead to organization problems. And in order to accommodate multiple lines of code, you need to keep yourself organized, and naming variables helps accomplish this. Now, the one thing you should know is that it must start with an alphabetical character. It cannot start with a number, right? It always has to be a alphabetic character. It can't use any of the keywords reserved as variable names. The full list can be accessed here. You can just type this out right now, but in general, it should be highlighted in the Eclipse in case you ever accidentally put it in. Now, it should also match both the function and the type of variable. And although it doesn't cause errors like this rule and this rule, it does lead to organization problems, and following this rule prevents any blunders or hard to fix problems, because you'll always know what the variable accomplishes, so that way you don't get things screwed up. It also can include spaces in the variable names, because then it will not be considered a name. It will just consider the first half, so say variable name. If you split this up into variable then name, this will be considered just the name, and then this will be considered part of that variable, and it would cause errors, so you don't want that to happen. Now, further on, there's more rules that you need to know. There's also a organization rule again, is that you always start a variable name with a lowercase letter, then uppercase the first letter of each word, of each additional word. This is considered camel casing. Now, in practice, this should mean that variable name, like this, should actually be variable name, because Java is very case sensitive, and if you want, developers have made it a standard that you want the first word to always be lower caps, and then the subsequent words do not have any spaces following it, but have a capital in order to distinguish it, because it would be really hard to read if you just put variable name like this and then you kept typing on like hello world. Then that's really hard to see. But if you say do this, then that's much easier to read. Now, Java is very case sensitive, as I said, and variable name in all lower caps is not the same thing as a camel-cased variable name. So, in this case, this would be a separate memory from this. So make sure to always follow the cases that you've set for yourself. Now, declaring variables in Java. Creating a variable is also called declaring a variable. When you declare a variable, a memory location, or a sequence of bits, as the memories are called, is set aside for that variable of that type, and the name is associated with that location. In order to declare, you need to specify the type, then leave at least one space, then the name of the variable, and end the line with a semicolon. This is then provided an example here. Afterwards, assign data to a variable name, /initialize a variable by specifying the variable name and setting it equal to the data. This means that sorry, that's a typo. You should have this already set out, then use that variable name and then set it equal to the data. So say hello world is equal to hello world. And this can also be done on the same line in order to save space. This can be done by saying string hello world is equal to hello world, and then semicolon. So in practice, that should be what it looks like. Now, for application, this is the code we'll be putting into Eclipse. Now let me just access Eclipse. Now let me copy and paste the code, and it should look like this. You can do this for yourself in order to check it for yourself. Now you can change this to whatever you want. I'm calling this new variable int score in order to specify a number. Then I'm setting the score equal to 0. And the system.out.println.score will print out 0. Then I'm going to name a new variable called double price. The price will be 2.55. And this will then print out 2.55. Now if I made the boolean 1 by creating a variable called 1 of the type boolean, it will have 1 is equal to false. Now the reason why you want to name it boolean is because you want the specific true or you want a specific false. This is different from false and true with double quotation marks, because this is simply just a sequence of characters in the eyes of the IDE. But if you simply do it without the quotation marks, this is considered a false statement. Now this means that whenever you say something is true, then it will do it. Then if something is false, then it won't do it. And this will print out in the console false. And you can click on this, which is the run button, and then it should click OK. It should launch the console, and it should print out 0, 2.55, and false. You can edit this for yourself and see what variables you can make. Just, make sure to specify the type. Okay, now, the data variable holds is not set in stone. It can be changed. If you use a variable to keep score, for example, you could increment it or add 1 to the current value. You can do this by setting the variable to the current value of the variable plus size of the increment. So say you have score right here. You can do score is now equal to score plus 1, semicolon. Now, in the console, it should print out 0. Oh, my bad. You need to do system.out.println score, semicolon. And now, run it again, and should print out 1. Because this means that you're using the old value, which is 0, and then you're adding a 1 to it. Now you can do this again. So say if you have 3 right here, run it again, then we'll lead out to 4. This is true for every time you use this. So now if you have 4 now, you can do, say, score is equal to score plus 1 again, then system, .out.println score, and run, and it should print out 5. So you can always use the variables that are already stored and then use that old value and add something to it to create a new value for that variable. Now, you can also set one's variable value to a copy of the value of another variable. This won't change the value of the variable that is being copied, but it will change the value of the variable that's being set. So say you have price. You can then create a new variable called say double copy of price, then set it equal to price, semicolon, then system.out.println copy of price. Then you can then set run, okay, then it will print out 2.55. Though you didn't change the value of price, you did change the value of copy of price. So, moving on, this is going to be showing the exact same thing with the increment example with score plus 1 and copying example as well. And that should about wrap it up for this video.